You mentioned Senator Graham. I don't think we have the quote, but I heard it earlier this morning when he was at a dinner in Kyiv, seated next to President Zelensky. Senator Graham was quoted as saying, "That money that we spent killing Russians, best money we ever spent." Now, an attitude like that is going to produce, I would think, some significant blowback. I mean, can we ever expect to have diplomatic relations with Russia while Vladimir Putin is the president?
Well, we can if people like Lindsey Graham meet their comeuppance. That's a long shot, but Russia plays a long game like China. And, the response for the foreign affairs spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, was really interesting about Lindsey Graham. I printed it out this morning. I can't find it now, but she says, this is what we're up against. This is crazy. This is racism, and this is obviously a very influential person. We're going to have to proceed against him legally. And that's what the Russians are apparently doing now, trying to find some way to say, well, this guy's a war criminal, obviously, because he thinks a dead Russian is a good Russian.
How is there a racial involvement in Americans' government using Ukraine as a battering ram to get rid of Vladimir Putin?
Well, it's more than racial, of course, with respect to the Russians. The Americans have been subjected to 6 straight years of brainwashing that Putin is the devil incarnate and the Russians are out to take over not only Ukraine, but the Baltic states and Poland. Now, all of that is unproven, but most Americans believe that because of the media. So with respect to Ukraine, people just say, we have to beat the Russians there. Here's some people saying, before we have to meet them here, right? Give me a break. There's not one scintilla of evidence that it ever entered Putin's head to annex Crimea before we staged that coup on the 22nd of February 2014. Now, I uncovered something related to that I had forgotten. Putin said, Obama called me on the 21st of February 2014. Putin said this publicly. He said, and he reassured me, we got everything under control here. We're fine, okay? Same day, Biden called Yanukovych, and he said, better get out of town and call your police off. That's what happened. The president deceiving the president of Russia and the vice president telling the president, the duly elected president of Ukraine, bug off, get out of town, and make sure you guys don't resist. And so Yanukovych says, all right. And he gets out of town. He has to be rescued by the Russians. So if you talk about double crossing and stuff, this is the personal experience that Mr. Putin has had with both Mr. Obama and Mr. Biden. Final thing here, Biden told Putin on the 30th of December 2021, Washington has no intention of deploying offensive strike missiles in Ukraine. Big deal. New Year's Eve, big celebration in Moscow. Closest Putin advisors, Ushakov, this is great. The negotiations are off to a great start. Guess what happened? Fell off the table. Sullivan and Biden and Nolan probably whispered in Joe, you didn't really say that, did you? Oh, yeah, I thought maybe. Well, forget about it. He forgot about it, and that all happened just 6-8 weeks before the war in Ukraine. So to say that it was unprovoked is really crazy. To say that he had other options is also crazy, and that's a live issue now because I raised it recently, and nobody can tell me what are the options. Putin.
Let me show you and everyone watching us now what happened in Moscow this morning. This is one of the drones that exploded in a residential neighborhood. Now, I don't know drones. That looks like a lot to me. And I know it was in a residential neighborhood, and it was a 10-minute drive from President Putin's official residence. But my question to you, Ray, is this. Would American intel have known of the decision to deploy drones in that manner by the Ukrainians before they were deployed? And if the answer to that is yes, would Victoria Nuland and her crew have consented to it?
I don't know the answers to that, but that's not the real issue here. The answer to that is what Putin thinks. Now, there are enough U.S. and other NATO officers embedded with everything that the Ukrainian military does and their secret services do, that Putin could not avoid thinking or concluding that, yes, this was done with the encouragement of at least of the Americans that really count in Kiev. So what does that mean? Well, the U.S. What the U.S. said with respect to the one on 8 April, I guess it was, is that, we've researched this, and these Ukrainians did it all by themselves. We weren't informed of that. The U.S. let the Ukrainians off easy on that one. Now, this time, there were several drones and shot down. No apparently damage except property damage. But now, are the Russians going to say, right, you want us to believe that the Ukrainians did this all by themselves? Well, that's worse. That's worse than they did it with your permission. They're loose cannons. Are they trying to get us into a war with you guys? Well, of course they are. But Putin, pretty cool-headed. I don't think he's going to rise to the bait.
Here's Victoria Nuland. Just 4 days.
We have to?
Just for history's sake.
Okay.
And even as you plan for the counteroffensive, which we have been working on with you for some 4 or 5 months, we are already beginning our discussions with the Ukrainian government and with friends in Kyiv, both in the civilian side and on the military side, about Ukraine's long-term future.
Let's start with the first one. The American government, I guess she talks for the State Department, not for the DOD, has been working on preparing the spring offensive for 4 or 5 months. Here we are at the end of May, beginning of June. Where's the offensive? Number one. Number two, does it surprise you that Americans, if she's being truthful, have been involved in the planning of this offensive? And number three, what is she talking about planning for the Ukraine government for the future?
Where has General Zaluzhny gone? Yes. Long time. We haven't seen him for a whole month, right? Okay. What's going on there? The thing keeps being delayed. I'm sure they're going to try something, but they'll only try it because of people like Nuland saying, you got to do this or else you're going to run out of money. We're not going to be able to justify more expenditures. It's come to a head now. There aren't going to be more billions of dollars given by this Congress, I don't believe. So the same denouement that happened in Vietnam and happened in Nicaragua, finally, I think the Congress is going to tighten the purse strings and say, well, look, let's make a deal. These guys are really from hunger. Where is Zaluzhny anyway? And Nuland, yeah, she's openly admitting what we're doing. And, when the general staff is advising Putin and he's saying, well, maybe the Americans didn't know about these drones, they're going to say, oh, wait a second. Listen to this from Nuland, will you? They're planning this thing for 4 and 5 months. So it's getting pretty dangerous. Again, I think Putin is on a roll. He doesn't need to rise to this bait. He may do something serious with respect to where Zelensky lurks these days, But I would even say that's not probable. He just can go along just as he is until Congress shuts down the funds.
You mentioned General Zaluzhny. He was, of course, the chief of staff of the Ukraine military.
Right.
And you and our other friends with experience in the military have said he is or has been respected as a military leader, not as a political hack. You have also, I think, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, come to the conclusion that General Zaluzhny suffered a life-changing injury, some sort of injury to his head when he was at the front, and will never be the chief of the military again. Are you of that view?
Yes, I still am. He clearly was injured. What the Ukrainians have been trying to do is piece together old images, old photography, and old video clips to show that he's still alive. So I think he's still alive. I think he's incapacitated. And what they've shown has been transparently designed to show that the man lives. He may live, but if the Russians can be that precise in their drone strikes, well, that's damage. That's personal injury, not shooting up a bunch of buildings. So, the Russians have a lot. They haven't even deployed yet. What I'm saying here is that it's really high time, that the sophomores that advise Biden really tell them to take a look at the map, Joe. This is a really, really bad idea from the beginning. Let's get these guys to negotiate and ceasefire.
We still don't have an off-ramp, Ray, do we?
Yeah, we do. All it takes is for Biden to realize what I just said and to lean on Zelensky and say, all right, look, we're going to settle for what we can get. The Russians will negotiate. They may use the Vatican. They may use Erdogan in Turkey. They can use whatever they want. And the deal they're going to get is not as good as the deal we offered them back in March of 2002, okay? But we'll deal. I don't think the Russians want to, I know that the Russians don't want to take over all of Ukraine. So a deal is in the offing. Actually, Medvedev, the former president, has spelled out 3 scenarios which are possible deals. So I'm hoping that before it gets still worse with F-16s and all that kind of stuff, that people come to their senses and say, well, look, we're running out of money anyway. NATO is divided. Let's deal.